Hey, the workshop is officially started, so I'm gonna take that banner down. You already know my name is Rosendo from MLH. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. Uh, Rolling right into the rest of Global Hack Week, and day three has officially commenced. So, how y'all feeling out there? Show me some love. Throw some emojis in the chat if you're with us. Let us know where you're joining from. I myself am joining from the not so sunny but still warm New York City on the East Coast. And as always, we have some great content prepared for y'all today. I am really excited to welcome back someone who has become one of my more favorite workshop administrators here on the MLH side for Global Hack Week, Jay, the Linux guy. I don't know why they call him that, honestly. I think it's because he knows a lot about Linux. Who knows? But maybe we'll find out shortly. Yeah, today we're going to be learning about Nextcloud and making some productivity tools that are cloud based so you can get up in the morning and be as productive as possible. That's what I needed this morning because I started out pretty early. But you know what? We're here. It's the afternoon now for me. And like, really awesome that we're seeing folks joining in from India. I know it's a little bit late on that side of the world, but you know what? We are here and we are going to keep it going. Without any further ado, allow me to introduce the highly esteemed Jay the Linux guy. Give him a round of applause, y'all.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
All right. Looks like we have folks joining us from Mexico.
Wow.
Oh, I know him. Yes. Jay was kind enough to join us during Global Hack Week Share as well. Yep.
Yep. And I have a lot of fun with this stuff. I love to do these presentations and meet people, meet people, even though I generally don't like the hyphen thing, but I'll use it this time because I think it fits. So, yeah, we're going to set up Nextcloud today, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Sounds good. I know the folks that are joining us are excited. I'm excited myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and slink back into the back of the studio, turn on my computer, and follow along as well. So y'all have at it. Thanks a lot, Jay, and see y'all at the end.
Thank you. All right, everybody. So we're going to set up Nextcloud today, which is one of my favorite applications. It's actually one of my favorite applications in general to host on a Linux server because there's just so many things that you could do with it. So we have a few hours here that we could work with, and I'm going to be creating this on Linode, but you don't have to create it on Linode because the instructions I'm going to be giving you guys is not, none of it's specific to Linode at all. So there's a free credit you can get with, free credit you can get with Linode if you want to follow along with me, or you could just go ahead and watch it and take notes. And at some point, I'll figure out where to post notes of my own so you guys can copy and paste the commands. Now, before I get started, just a little bit about myself for any of you that are new, they haven't seen me around before. My name is Jay LaCroix. I have been using Linux for about somewhere over 2 decades. It's been quite a while. It doesn't even feel that long. It feels like it's been a few years. Um, but throughout my career, I've been a system administrator, Linux administrator. I've been in DevOps and eventually became the director of operations for the company that I work for. And then it was almost a year ago that I actually put in my 2 weeks notice at that company because I wanted to go into business for myself and do this full time. So I do Linux training full time through Learn Linux TV, which is available at learnlinux.tv. So you can go there and there's hundreds of videos there about all kinds of things. And, some of the commands that I'm going to be showing you guys were actually pulled from one of my videos because, if it works, it works. I also write books. My fourth edition of Mastering Ubuntu Server is, that's my latest book. It's coming out probably September, maybe even as soon as next month. I don't have an exact date. Even the date on Amazon isn't going to be correct because when it's out, and the date can change. So ubuntuserverbook.com is where you could go to pre-order that. It's going to be out soon, like I mentioned, and it goes over Ubuntu 22.04. Now, today, what we're going to do is, like I mentioned, set up Nextcloud. I'm going to be using Ubuntu 20.04 because it's actually changed a bit from 20.04 to 22.04, and the commands, won't work if you try this on a newer version. Ubuntu 20.04 is actually supported for a while, so there's no problem. There's still security updates, so even though it's not the latest and greatest, it doesn't matter. I will be creating a new method that is based on 2204. I don't know when the video is going to come out, but I'm in the beginning stages of updating that. So there you go. So if you want to know anything more about me, just Google my name or go to learnlinux.tv to see what I'm up to, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Bear with me one moment while I adjust my windows here. And what you guys should see right now is my screen with a Linode console here. Again, Linode is not required. If you have a VirtualBox virtual machine, you could use that if you'd like. If you have a physical server, these commands will work. These commands are for Ubuntu 20.04. So if you try it on another distribution, I can't guarantee that it's going to work. And I know for sure, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't work on Ubuntu 22.04. So what I've done, just to kind of give you guys an example, and this will also give anyone in the room a chance to actually come up with a virtual machine. If you want to spin up VirtualBox or check out Linode, I'll leave that up to you. But as I go through the process here at the beginning, there's time to set up a virtual machine if you guys want to. Otherwise, you could just follow along with what I'm doing. So, and somebody mentioned not having VirtualBox. That's okay. I mean, it really doesn't matter what virtual machine solution you use. You could use Microsoft's Virtual PC. Are they still calling it that? I don't think they are. So what it doesn't really matter. We're doing this on Ubuntu 20.04, and I'm also going along with the video that I've done for 20.04. So if you are scrambling to try to get a virtual machine going right now, don't worry about it, because if you want to check out the video that I've already done, it's basically the same process. So don't worry too much about that. So either you can follow along with me, or you can follow along with me later. So what I've done, and let me know if you guys are having any trouble seeing the screen. Is the font size big enough? Is anyone having a hard time reading this? So just let me know if you guys have any issues or anything with anything I'm doing here. So I created this instance right here, and I created this off camera. The only reason why I created this off camera is because I wanted to have this IP address right here, which is the IP address of this particular instance. And I wanted there to be a chance for DNS to propagate. I have a different DNS server that I use. Actually, it's on a different Linode account, actually. And I wanted to map the domain to this IP address and give that some time to propagate. But let's go ahead and go back to the beginning. I'm going to pretend like I'm creating a brand new instance, and I'm going to do this the same way that I did it off camera earlier, just to show you what I've done. So on Linode's dashboard here, what I've done is I went ahead and created a instance. I selected Ubuntu, so I just scroll down here, and I selected Ubuntu 20.04. For the region, I always choose Canada. I'm not actually in Canada. I just like Canada, I guess. I love all the countries, but yeah, Canada's like right next door. So it's like going to another country and it's only like 30 minutes away is a really cool thing. But basically, you just choose whatever location is closer to you geographically. It really doesn't matter. There's a few features in Linode that may not be available in all regions, but most features are available in most regions. So that shouldn't be a problem there. Now, as an aside, I want to sidetrack here for a bit. I get asked this a lot. People will ask me, well, why are you building Nextcloud manually when Linode has a marketplace app right here? Literally, I could just click on this and that's it. I mean, literally, that's all there is to it. You just fill out the form and you get a Nextcloud instance. There's no setup required. However, I like to do things manually because I feel like you learn more that way. And since you guys are wanting to learn too, then I figured that's the best way to do it. So just know that this does exist if you're in a pinch for time. But like I mentioned, it's better to learn by doing it manually. No, it's not difficult. I've done this dozens of times, so it's easy for me to say. But no, seriously, this is not hard at all. So Ubuntu 2004, I chose Toronto, and then we choose the plan. The cheaper ones are here on the shared CPU tab here. It gives you like a monthly cost of what it would cost to run the instance. Now, if you just create this Nextcloud instance on Linode and it's just a demo, just make sure you delete everything you create afterwards, unless you want to keep it around, which I think you will after you see how awesome Nextcloud is. But just keep in mind that if you have an instance on Linode, there's a monthly cost for that. So if you don't want to accrue that, you can delete it. If you guys received a code, I don't know if you guys have. There's one available on my website. If you don't, but you'll get like $100 in credit. That's good for 60 days. So the trial is over if you use up the $100 or 60 days passes, whichever happens first. So you can actually get a couple of months out of this easily. Now, as far as which one to choose, I mentioned shared CPU is cheaper. I'm not going to go over the other ones. Those are more for like corporate and enterprise and things like that. I would say that the 2 gig instance is probably the minimum that I would go with. And preferably, I would say a comfortable minimum is this one. That's 4 gig. For mine, I created one that's 8 gig because I wanted this thing to be really fast for you guys. Not that it won't be fast on the other one as well, but it looks like there's a link in the chat room for credits towards a Linode account. And go ahead and check that out. If you want to follow along with me, there's still time. So all I've done is I've just set up my instance type, or excuse me, the distribution of Linux. And down here, I'm choosing the plan. So for the label, what I like to do is keep everything consistent. So I set up a DNS name of nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud. And you can't actually go to that URL yet because there's nothing running on the server yet. So if you try to go there, it's not going to work. But that's okay. It can't work until we build it, right? So anyway, I just like to keep the name consistent. That just makes everything easier, in my opinion. And then you just come up with a very long, randomly generated password, which I've already done all of this. So I'm not going to actually create the instance right now. But also backups. It gives you the cost of backups if you want to enable that. If it's something that you plan on using daily, I recommend it. Otherwise, you can opt out of that. Private IPs, we're not going to be focusing on that today. So after I went through that process, what I ended up with was this instance right here, 4 CPU cores, 160 gigabytes of storage, and we have the IP address right here. And we also get the command to connect to it. So if I click on Lish console here, it doesn't seem, there it is. This gives you a window, so to speak. It's almost like you have a monitor attached to a physical server, but it's like the virtual version of that, the VM version of that. So if you've ever used a virtual machine solution like VirtualBox or there's plenty of other ones, you'll have pretty much the same thing, but this is actually out there in the cloud. And we have a login prompt, so we can see that the instance is actually running. So what I'm going to do before we go to the next step, which is to actually connect to the instance and start running some commands, I'm going to give you guys a bit more time. And if there's any questions while we wait for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, then go ahead and ask the questions. Yep, and the credit card question comes up when we do these. So basically, the way I understand it is that there might be like a verification type thing that it'll do, but it's not going to charge your account if you actually be sure to disable the things that you don't plan on using. And then you don't have to worry about it. The way I like to do it is you just write down everything you create. We're only going to be creating a Linode instance, just one, in this session. So there's only one thing to delete. You don't have to worry about other things outside of maybe backups. If you enable that option when you're going through this, you'll probably have some images here that you have to disable or delete rather, that could show up in here. But that's what it is. But again, this demonstration is done on Linode. But if you want to follow along on a VM on your PC and your local computer, that's totally fine. You can absolutely do that. So, all right, just another minute for any other questions, and we'll move on to the next step. So I had the chat full screen, so hopefully you can see everything still. Looks like it's still working. Okay, so let's go ahead and get going with the process of creating our Nextcloud instance. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need to run commands against our server. On Linode, one way you can do that is by launching this Lish console that I had open a moment ago, and then you can absolutely log in, like I'm about to do right now, with the username and password that you gave it during the installation process. And assuming I typed everything in correctly, which I, of course, did not, let's try this again. And there we go. So basically, I have a command shell. Now, preferably, if you have a terminal, I know Windows Terminal is something that a lot of people use. If you have Linux, desktop distribution of Linux, then you already have a terminal. You can just check your applications for that. If you're running on a Mac, you have a terminal as well, built in. There's nothing to download for that. I don't remember what the process was for Windows. I thought that came with Windows, but you might have to go to the Microsoft Store and like download Ubuntu or something like that to get that going to have a local shell. There's also PuTTY for Windows. But if you don't have a terminal already, it's probably easier just to use this Lish console right here, because that's just easier to set up. So that way you don't have to reboot your computer because you installed something on Windows, which would take you out of the meeting and then you might miss something. So if you don't have a terminal built in like you do in Mac and Linux, then I guess this is fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to a terminal. So we're going to work with a terminal. And one of the things I like about this is that I can just increase the font size, and that might help you guys see it better. Windows services for Linux, yes. So that would be the Microsoft terminal, I think they're calling it, that I mentioned earlier. So if you install Windows services for Linux, you should be able to go to the Microsoft Store and download a Linux distro. If that gives you SSH, just by having that installed, the WSL, then you're good. You don't actually have to install Ubuntu or anything after that. I just don't remember chicken or egg problem, right? What comes first? SSH or actually installing Ubuntu to get SSH. But if you have the SSH command on Windows and in a command prompt, then you're all set. You can use that. So what I have here is my local computer. I run Linux on everything. So this is my Linux laptop here. And if you're curious about the name, Unicorn, it's funny, I name all of my computers after Final Fantasy VI Esper's characters in the game. Unicorn is one of those, or like legendary beasts or something. Summon monsters is just I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, so I try to insert that anytime I can. But the prompt is very custom. You're probably not going to see a bash prompt like this unless you've customized it. But what I'm going to do is find out if the domain name is actually propagated to the IP address. So to do that, I'm going to type nslookup, and I'm going to run that query against, let's see, nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud. And we have an IP address here of 172.105.29.19. which is great because that matches the IP address here that I have in Linode, which means that the domain name has finished propagating. It could take 24 to 48 hours. I created this about an hour before this started, so I'm very happy that it's already propagated. You can't always depend on that though, but it looks like we're good. So I could use the SSH command against this IP address, but what I'm going to do is use the domain name because I have one. So I'm going to log in as root. Normally Ubuntu does not have the root account enabled by default. We're not going to allow SSH into this machine via root in our next session, but it's just a temporary thing, so we'll go along with it. And then I'll say yes. And we're in. So we are now seeing the command shell that's open to the actual Nextcloud instance that I set up. So what I'm going to do is start going through some commands to get us going. Now, one of the first things that we should do is create a user account for ourselves. And the reason for that is because we don't want to run as root all the time. That's a bad practice. We want to run as a normal user. So what I'll do is I'll run the add user command as root, and that allows me to, well, add a user. The command tells you what it does. I like commands like that. It's obvious what it does. You don't even have to look it up. It adds a user. It's great. So I'll add a user named Jay, and then I'll press enter. So for the password, I'll type that in. And then I'll put in my name. You don't have to really fill this out. I don't even know why I'm doing it. I'll just press enter to skip the rest. And that's it. We have a user account. We can see the home directory for that user right there. But what we also need to do is give that user access to run administrative commands. So if you're not familiar with Linux, this is essentially the same as giving administrator rights to a non-administrator user. The Linux version of that is we use usermod. There's other commands that will do the same thing. We're just going to add the user to a group. So -a, lowercase a is add, uppercase G is group. So I want to add a user to a group. Actually, I think it's sudo. So the name of the group first, and then the name of the user. I always get those things confused for some reason. Some distributions of Linux use a different group for this, like wheel, for example. But on Ubuntu and Debian, it's sudo. So I'll just press enter. And then to confirm that the user is a member of that group, we run groups and then the username. As you can see here, the user is a member of sudo. So to test this out, I'll type exit on the terminal, and then I'll just press the up arrow here. I'll change root to my name. And if this works, I should be able to access the server as Jay. Let's see. So now you can see that I'm logged in as Jay. You could tell that from the bash prompt here on the left-hand side. That's very typical to see the username there. So what I've done so far is I've created a new user, and I added my user to a group, the sudo group. I can type groups as that user to see what groups that user is a member of. As you can see, I am a member of sudo. Now, the next thing we're going to do is install updates. And basically nothing I've gone over so far is specific to Nextcloud. These are all things that you want to do on any Linux server you set up because you don't want to run as root. And you also want to make sure that you always install all security patches as soon as they're available. That's extremely important. And if you don't believe it's important, I'll just switch to root and I'll show you why it is. Not that anyone doesn't believe that, but you know what I mean. If I go into the var log directory, actually, I think it's in auth log. Let's just cat that out. Now check this out. User ZY is trying to get into the server. That's not me. I didn't do that. Let's see if we find anything else suspicious in here. This J guy, oh gosh, he's trying to get into the server. What's wrong with him? Okay, kidding. So this server hasn't existed for that long, so we're not going to see that many. But we also have like a user account right here. Someone tried to get into the server with that username. Admin123, somebody tried that. I even see the IP address that they're coming in from. So if you're curious why we Linux people and server admins tell you guys to install all the patches as soon as they're available, I mean, this is why. This is actually why we're seeing in real time, well, kind of real time, people are trying to get into the server. So, and this is normal, by the way. You're always going to see this. Now, in the next session I'm going to be doing tomorrow, we'll be locking this down, but there's no such thing as perfect security, so install your updates. So anyway, back to my user here, I'm going to start the process of installing updates by running sudo, which is the command that we use in a lot of Linux distributions to tell the system we want to run a command with administrative or root privileges. And any command that makes changes to the system will need this. So that's what we use sudo for any command that makes system-wide changes. Okay, so we're going to run sudo apt update. And this itself is not going to install updates, but what it does is it refreshes the index of packages that are available. And I'll just press enter. And usually this happens very quickly. So these are software repositories. Linux has had software repositories for a very long time, pretty much before the iPhone was a thing. And it was our equivalent of the App Store. It's like a command line app store in a way, to think of it that way. So all of our software comes from one place, a repository. And this command just refreshes which applications, patches, and things are available. But it didn't actually update any packages yet. But now that we have installed all the updates, we can run sudo apt dist upgrade, dist-upgrade, just like that. So that's the command that I'm about to run. Whoops, trying to lower the font size there. Okay, so I'm going to run this command right here. So I'll press enter. And it's telling me that there's more than a few packages here that need to be updated. And OpenSSL is a very important security one. So, and we have libSSL as well. So there's definitely some important security updates here. Y is capital. I don't actually have to type Y. I mean, I could do that, but since Y is capital, it's the default option. So if I just press enter, then it goes for the default option, whatever is capital, which in this case is to confirm that I do want to install all of these packages right here. And it's updating packages. It's actually updating everything. Everything that's installed that has an update is getting the update installed. So far, what we've done is we've created a user for ourselves. We've logged in, and we also installed updates as well, which is a great thing to do. Another thing that we're going to do is change the name of the server. It says localhost. Now, that's fine if you only have one server, but if you're like me and you have more than one, if you keep the default name on all of them, you're not going to know which is which. You might enter the wrong command, or I should say the right command, but on the wrong server. That's not a good day. I've done that. It doesn't go well. You definitely want to make sure that you are attached to the server you think you are. So what we should do is change the name to avoid that problem in the future. So what I'll do is I will run sudo nano. And actually, well, there's more than one way to do this. I'm just going to stick to this way. It's the old-fashioned way, but I like it better. Anyway, what we want to do is edit a file that's underneath the /etc directory, and it's called hostname. And I recommend, if you're following along with me, that everybody does this, but not everybody is going to have a domain. So I'm just backing out everything here. If you don't have a domain, which I'm going to assume is probably 99% of you, actually it's probably 100% of you, but maybe a few of you, that are studying ahead, you have a domain. You could type that in. So, but if you don't, you could just simply call it Nextcloud. If nothing else, you could just call your server whatever it is or what it's for. It's a Nextcloud server. That's what it's going to be. But if you do have a domain, you could type that in here. And this is the domain that I have for this instance here. So basically what I'm doing is I'm setting the host name to the actual domain name that I have for it. So Control O, enter to save the file, Control X to exit out. And then there's one more file, Etsy hosts, similar name, similar purpose even. And here we have the Etsy host file. So if you ever went into I think it's in the Windows System 32, there's like an INI directory. Every operating system has a host file. So this is not unique at all. Maybe the format could be, but depending on your OS. But for the most part, it's, this is on everything. And Etsy host is local name resolution. So what I'm going to do first is actually just type the IP address, and then I'll explain it. I'm going to use a different IP address for this, 127.0.1.1. And I'm going to type the same name, whatever we typed in the hostname file, we want to do the same thing here. We want to make it match. Now, while you guys are catching up, either your notes or you're following along, whichever it is, 127 IPs, like you see here, are local loopback adapters. So essentially, it's the name that the server itself recognizes itself as. So the server knows itself as localhost. And with this, it'll also know itself as nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud. And it's very common for developers, especially when they're maybe testing a new version of an application. They might add a IP address, an actual IP address. This isn't publicly routable, but something like, I'm just making up numbers at this point. And then you could just type whatever the name is and make it that. But we're not going to get into that. I just want to let you guys know that it's possible. But for our purposes, we're only really concerned with this one server. So I'm just going to keep it simple like this. If you don't have a domain, you just simply shorten it to that. That's fair enough. Anyway, Control O again, Enter to save, and Control X to exit out. So now that we've installed all the updates, and in addition to that, we've also changed the host name, in my case, added the domain name. That's a lot. So we're almost to the point where we can actually start getting Nextcloud installed. But before we do that, we should run sudo reboot, because that's going to reboot the entire instance and make sure that all the updates are applied. So I'll just press enter, and that's going to drop me immediately. So it's going to take a few minutes for the server to come back online. What I could do is just press the up arrow and just press enter, and it'll reconnect me. But before I do that, I want to just pause for a bit here, give you guys some time to catch up or also ask questions if you have any. I figure within, it's probably already mostly booted or started by now, but I'll maybe wait a couple of minutes. So have my eyes on the chat. Yes, that is the localhost login. Root is the username, and the password that you just made is that one there. I'm going to see if I can get you guys, just bear with me a moment. This will really help you. So I mentioned earlier I was going to find a place to put the notes and things, and then I actually remembered I already have that. Since reinventing the wheel. So I'm going to see if I can have someone paste this link that I'm about to post there. And the link that you should be seeing shortly will take you to the learnlinux.tv page. And all the commands I'm using are there. So if you are, behind a bit, trying to catch up, I don't want anyone to stress out. Anxiety actually hurts your body. It's a bad thing. So let's all relax, and you could just catch up by following the commands there, because I'm pulling the commands from there. So if I'm doing it, you may as well do the same. So what's the difference between Nano, Vi, and Vim? Often VI and Vim are linked together. Most of the time, and I agree with the people that say this, they say just use Vim. There's no like Vim is literally VI improved. That's what the acronym is. So just use that. Nano is fine. Nano comes with Ubuntu, and that's why I often use it in my videos. It's easier to explain. Vim is my favorite. That's the one I use as a day-to-day editor. It's to the point where sometimes I, have to edit myself out of the videos using Vim because I do it out of habit when when Nano's easier to teach. So my suggestion is to learn Nano first, just to have something. And then you can learn Vim as well if you want to. I have videos on both, literally. So you can just check learnlinux.tv, and there's videos on using those. So you can get all you need for free from there. So I think at this point, the server should be up. Let's see. think more than enough time has passed, actually. And yeah, it's up. So I'm logging in as my regular user. Now look at the bash prompt at the upper left corner. It says Nextcloud now. My domain is nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud. By default, it shortens it down to the first part. So if I type the hostname command, just like that, you'll see the whole entire hostname. So it did set that. So now we have everything updated. I know it rebooted. Whoops, wrong command. Actually, what I should have done is typed uptime, which tells you how long your server has been online for. So it's only been up 2 minutes. So yeah, it definitely restarted. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to a web browser. And what we're going to do is find the URL for Nextcloud. And I think it's nextcloud.com. Let's see if I'm right. It is. Yep. Okay. So when you click Get Nextcloud, which is like, whoops, too big, up here, we're going to try to find where the download link is. And it changes from time to time. But what we want to do is click here, Nextcloud server. Let that load. And let's see, where is it? Where is it? I think it's this one. Bear with me a moment. Yep. So it's this one right here. So what you could do is just right click, copy link. And if you're on the Lish console, you probably won't be able to paste this in, but you really won't have to worry about that because I'm reminded that the URL never changes actually. What we'll do is type wget, paste in the URL. And if you are using the Lish console, let me know if anyone's able to paste in there. I don't think you can, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But either way, it's not the most difficult URL. Right here to type in, it's just download.nextcloud.com. And the file name will be latest.zip, as we can see right there. So I'll press enter. And the wget command is a downloader. You just give it a URL of something you want to download. It might have trouble with redirect links if it is one, but this is not. Basically, all I did was I ran wget and I pasted a URL to something that I want to get. So the name, another one of those names I like. So what it did for us was it gave us this latest.zip file right here. This is actually Nextcloud. We're not going to work with this file just yet. We'll be getting back to this file later, but we just wanted to have it on hand. So it's there when we're ready for it. So bear with me one moment. Okay, so we have that file. The next thing that we want to do is set up the database server. We need a database to for the backend of Nextcloud. You could use a database server that's external. We're not going to do that. I'm going to have everything in one server today, but some people out there and even companies and organizations will have a dedicated database server. That's just beyond the scope. But what I'm going to do is run sudo apt install. And the package name is MariaDB-server, which is a drop-in replacement for MySQL. So if you are familiar with MySQL, you will be right at home with this right here. So that's all I'm going to do. Sudo apt install MariaDB-server. So I will press enter and then type my super secret password. And even though I only asked for one package, there's quite a few. That's normal. If you didn't already know that, if there's dependencies, then the apt command will grab those for you. And so that way you don't have to worry about it. I mean, back in the day when I started a long time ago, if you saw 28 dependencies or however many there are here, then you would have to get those, all of them. You'd have to look them all up. It was not fun. So the fact that you can just install one package and it grabs everything that package needs and it doesn't bother you with that, that's great. That just makes it easier. So I'll press enter, which is going to accept the default of yes. And now MariaDB is installing. And it's done. So what we can do is we can run systemctl status MariaDB. And this will tell us whether or not it's running. We just want to make sure that it's working. It says active and running. You see that right here. That's good. That's what we want to see. And it's enabled. Enabled means that when we restart the server, whatever service is enabled means it's going to automatically start. You don't have to manually start this every time a Linux server starts up. Some distributions will default to disabled, which means, well, I mean, you have to enable it. But in our case, if you're following along with me and using Ubuntu, that's not something that we'll have to worry about. You shouldn't see any problems here. So I'll press Q to break out of that. And now we have MariaDB installed. Now, the problem with database servers is that they're a target for outside attackers. And it makes sense because a company's database server has their secrets in it. So of course they're going to want to get it, right? One tip that, and this is something we'll talk about in tomorrow's session, a database server should never, I repeat, never be publicly accessible for any reason. It should just not happen. And I've heard all of the cases where some people might think that their database server should be remotely available. There's always a way around that to make it not required. Since a database server is so important and also a big target, we definitely don't want to have that available to the public. So what I'm going to do is run sudo, then MySQL, even though it's MariaDB, this command has MySQL in the name, hasn't been updated yet, at least as far as I know anyway, _secure _installation. And what this command is going to do is ask us some questions about our database server. And these questions all pertain to security. Now, this will increase the security of the database server, but it's not going to make it bulletproof or anything. This basically sets up basic security, like the things everybody should have, and doesn't go any further than that. So it's a great starting point for now. But what I'll do is press enter on that. Now it's asking us to set the current password for root. Now they're not talking about your root password on Linode. That is absolutely not what they're talking about. Same username, completely different user. So you wouldn't type your Linode root user password here at all. Actually, we haven't set a password for the database server. So we don't even have a password for this yet. So we simply just press enter and skip this prompt right here. And I'm not sure if you could see it on the bottom or not. My name tag might be over top of it. But it's basically just asking if I want to set a root password. Y is caps. So I do, because I don't want a root user for anything to have no password. That's bad. So by pressing enter, it's just asking me to set a password for that user. So I'm just going to type it in. A randomly generated password is best here. This is just a demo instance, so I don't really care about it, but I'm still going to try to get it reasonably secure anyway. I'll re-enter the password again. Now it's asking me if I want to remove anonymous users. I'm going to see if I can make this more visible here. Okay, so that doesn't work. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see this question or not, but it says remove anonymous users. Y is capital. We do want to do that, so I'll press enter. Disallow root login remotely. Sounds like a great idea to me. I don't want anyone logging in as root, not even myself. I have a user account for that. Or we will be creating a user for MariaDB anyway. I'll just press enter to accept that default. Remove the test database and access to it. Yes, enter. Reload privileged tables. That just makes sure that all your changes in the script have taken effect. So we definitely want to do that. And I'll press enter for that. And now we have a base database server that is all set and ready to go. There's a few more commands that we can run to set this up for the database portion, and then I'll pause for questions. So what we want to do is access the MariaDB command prompt. We're on the bash or Linux command prompt right now. What we could do is run sudo MariaDB, and that should get us into the MySQL/MariaDB shell. And notice that it didn't even ask me for a password. So by running sudo, by default, sudo escalates to root. So I'm logged in as root in the database server as well. It didn't ask me for the password because if you have access to sudo, I mean, you have access to bypass the password. There's really no point in asking for a password. I mean, you could put in a password. It's good to have one, but long story made short, it just drops us right into the shell. And you could tell that you're in the database server shell because the prompt is completely different. It even says MariaDB right there. So we definitely know which one we're on. So what I'm going to do is type create database and then Nextcloud. Now, it's not required for create and database to be in all caps. It's often the case that people do this because when you look at MySQL syntax code, the code portion is in caps, but the arguments or names or data values or whatever are in lowercase. So Nextcloud is the name of the database, so that's lowercase. Semicolon to end the statement, you have to have that. Again, we could have create database in lowercase, but it's better to read it this way because there's just no question which part of the syntax is MySQL specific. But all we're doing, like it shows right here, is we're creating a database, and that's really all there was to it. So we could type show, and then databases, and don't be alarmed that there's databases here that we didn't create. These are default schema-related things. The MySQL database, don't touch that. You'll break it. Trust me, I've done it. Okay, but we have the Nextcloud database right here. That's the one that we've created. So we know that it exists now. So that's pretty cool. So we have that. Now, the next command is so long that I'm going to be grabbing it from my own notes because, even I have to do that. So, and yes, you are seeing my notes right now, and I'm okay with that. Full transparency, right? So this password right here is just an example. We really don't want to use that password at all. So what I'm going to do is just set it to something, and normally you want to randomly generate a password, and the only reason why I'm not is just because I'm keeping it simple for demo purposes. But I'll just type pizza because I'm hungry, burgers because I'm really hungry, TMNT because that is a really awesome fandom. I like Batman, Doctor Who. Gotta type it better, and then a bunch of exclamation marks. So I'll press enter. And what I will do is just copy this here because I'm not going to remember that. And normally you wouldn't want a password in clear text, but again, this is just an example. So I don't want to forget that password. So what did we actually do here? So what we did is we essentially created a user in MySQL. It's called a grant. So we created a grant, but it's basically, for all intents and purposes, a user. Now we're granting all privileges to the Nextcloud, or actually, excuse me, let me start over. We're granting all privileges on the Nextcloud database. Unintended scroll there. The dot star is like every table and everything underneath it, but we name the database Nextcloud. We're granting that to a user that's named Nextcloud, which we have not created at all, but it is being created as part of this command. So this command gives permissions to the Nextcloud user, to the Nextcloud database, and creates that user as well, all in one command, and even sets a password here. So again, normally you would never want your password in clear text. If this was a production server and people saw a password in clear text, they would absolutely log into the database server if it was publicly available, which it isn't. But you get the point. We'll just don't do that. This is a demo, so we can get away with it this time. So what we want to do now is run another command called flush privileges. It's just going to make sure that all the changes we've made to users and grants and things take effect. And after that, we could just type exit. And we are back to the regular bash Linux shell right here. So we've set up the database server. That part is done. So that's awesome. That's a big step right there. So let's pause and see if anyone has any questions. And in a couple of minutes, we'll continue. And actually, if the majority wants like a a break to go get something to drink or use the restroom or whatever, we could probably do that right now as well. So it's 1:49 EST right now. So in 10 minutes, we will continue. And in the meantime, while I don't need a break personally, so I'll be here to answer questions. And then in 10 minutes, we'll get back to it. The next thing to do is to set up the web server portion, which is what we'll be doing next. And since this is a break, I do allow off-topic questions during breaks. So, absolutely, I'm going to prioritize questions that are on topic to what we're doing today. But in lieu of other questions, if there's anything Linux in general, if I know the answer, I'll give it to you. Um, so go ahead and ask questions. Otherwise, I'll see you in 10 minutes. So, what firewall do I use? So, my opinion on firewalls is it really depends on the platform. If you are using a cloud provider, whether it's Linode or any of the others, you should use the firewall that is built into the platform. Otherwise, I mean, IP tables, UFW is a front end to that works very well. That is pretty much standard nowadays. So that's what I'll reach for if I'm not using a cloud provider. One benefit of that is it's easier to hook into automation tools. But my favorite firewall is one that works, and you want to verify this. I mean, don't just assume it works. Just try to get in from an IP address that you haven't allowed, and if you can't, then it works. If you can, you got a problem. So UFW is a great one. Again, if you're using a cloud provider, just use their tools. That's why they made it available. It's for their platform. So in the case of Linode, I'll use their firewall. And then when it comes to my local firewall on my home network or my business network, because it's the same thing, I use pfSense for that, which is a free BSD version. And as far as I know, there really isn't anything Linux equivalent that I'm aware of that can compete with pfSense. And an alternative to pfSense that people like is OpenSense, OPN Sense. So open is abbreviated, OPN Sense. I haven't used it myself. I've heard a lot of great things about it though. So that would be a good solution for local, or if you just have one Linux server, just use UFW. All right, so we have 8 minutes left. So if anyone has any other questions, go ahead and ask. Don't be shy. The only stupid question is the one that you don't ask. Seriously, there's no such thing as stupid questions otherwise. So ask away. And while I'm waiting for questions, what I'm going to do is like copy the next command because the next one I want to run is one of those longer ones. So I'll just have that ready here. So MariaDB in terms of advantages, one advantage is I just don't see a reason not to use it. Now, MySQL is absolutely not going anywhere, but there was some drama about licensing and some other things about the nature of MySQL. I want to say that it was something about Oracle, which has generally had a little bit of controversy. So I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but generally speaking, when something becomes overly political and a company may or may not be a good steward of something, it's often the case that something will get forked. But MariaDB has all the features of MySQL plus additional features. Now, I haven't tried it myself, but database replication I've heard is a lot better in MariaDB. So you could think of it like it's MySQL plus better replication. Now that's a gross oversimplification of it. It's definitely much more than that, but for the most part, a lot of distributions are defaulting to that. So, I just go along with that decision because sometimes going against the distribution, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're also kind of taking things into your own hands too. And since it's a drop-in replacement, then it's fine to use. And I'm nervous about saying drop-in replacement because when someone comes out with a technology and they say this is a drop-in replacement for X, I'm like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it because it's probably going to break and it's probably going to be horrible. But MariaDB has been the one that actually is a drop-in replacement. It works. So that's basically why we use it. Postgres is fine. I've used it from time to time. Um, I don't really have any specific reason to say not to use Postgres. Uh, the problem with Postgres and MySQL and things like that, if you were to get like 4 Linux administrators in a room and you ask all 4 of them which database server you should use, after you ask that question, walk away. Just walk out of the room. They're going to argue. They're going to. I mean, I'm being silly, but it kind of is the case that each one will have their own opinion because it's just one of those things. Each one will swear theirs is better than the other. My opinion is try them all. Why not? Just try Postgres, try MariaDB, try MySQL. You can't really switch database servers very easily without breaking things, but you could do it on different instances and absolutely compare them. And that's part of the fun of Linux is that you can run an experiment, set up 3 VMs, MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, but the rest is the same. That'll probably be a great way to do it. How to set up Linux for the first time? That kind of depends on Linux on the server or Linux on the desktop. I probably need to know like desktop, laptop, or server because that question will need a little bit more context, I think. Hydrate myself. It's warm out. So what types of projects would you use an Ubuntu server with Nextcloud for? Now, you'll see some of the features, but Nextcloud can be a almost like a Google Apps replacement. It has online document editing, file synchronization, collaborative editing. So if I'm working on a document and then someone that I work with is, somewhere else, then we can work on the document together. So it has that feature. You can sync your phone to it too, like calendar notifications, your contacts. You could actually put your email in there, so you can have it pull in your email, so you can check your email in there. Um, there's a lot of plugins too. So one of my favorites, I don't know if they fixed it, but there was an issue. Long story, but basically what it does is it lets you have ebooks right there in a folder, and you just open them up, and you can read books. So if you have like ebooks, like IT books or something like that, you could have them right there accessible to you. There's so many plugins that it's like it's not a question of what you can do. It's like a question of what can't you do because you could do almost everything that you could think of. I mean, it's not going to make you coffee. It's not going to make you better at video games. So it doesn't do everything. But when it comes to productivity stuff, file related things, it does all that in spades for sure. So Linux on the desktop, I highly recommend Pop! OS. I've tried all of them, and Pop! OS just seems like it has more of the desktop features that you would expect. For example, last I checked, Ubuntu, which is a great desktop distro, and I don't think Linux Mint has this either, unless they've added it. There's the ability to reinstall the entire distribution without wasting your files. So if you think about Windows and Mac OS, they both let you do this, where you want to wipe and restore your computer, but you don't want to, mess up your files. Now, obviously, I hope you have a backup because that's not a backup, but allowing you to reinstall the OS without messing up your files, that's awesome. Driver support is better in Pop! OS than any distribution out there. Ubuntu is number 2. Um, so that's another reason to choose it. Linux Mint is a great choice as well. Someone mentioned that. Ubuntu is also great. What I would say is to download Ventoy, Ventoy, and I'll be doing a video about it. I don't know when it's going to come out. But you could drop ISO images, the download files for Linux distributions, and put them all in a folder and just try them out in demo mode without installing them, and just try them all. I mean, not all, there's too many to try, but I would say, like, pick the top 10 mentioned distributions and download all of them and put them on the flash drive if you have enough space, and then you could just boot to whatever one you want and try them out, and whatever one speaks to you, that's the one that you should use, and everybody's gonna be different. Like, I'm recommending Pop! OS, and someone here might try Pop! OS and not like it, which is fine. That's why we have other ones to try, because you don't have to like it. There's no requirement to like it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But absolutely give them a shot. I do have guides. Yes, I have guides on the YouTube channel. I have a Linux for Noobs series, which was a shorter one that goes over some of that. If you're interested in more command and server related stuff, there's a Linux Crash Course series on my channel, which is the longest running tutorial series so far. So there's definitely some videos there. There's reviews, so you could check out reviews on my channel as well to see what a distribution looks like. And sometimes seeing it for yourself is, you know, is the best way to go. It's kind of like when you play video games. If you guys play video games, I mean, what do you do when you want to consider buying a game? You don't just run out and buy it. Normally, you just go on YouTube and you look at other people playing the game, and then you decide for yourself if the gameplay looks like something you might be interested in. Then you can go and buy the game, or maybe download the demo. Otherwise, if it's not what you like, you just move on and try another game and another video about the game. So pretty much the same thing with Linux. You just either try it yourself or watch review videos. There's a whole playlist of Linux reviews on my channel. So, and this is the last question before we resume. And I'll try to catch up to other questions later if there are any I've missed. But any thoughts on the Raspberry Pi, Raspbian? My thought about the Raspberry Pi is that it's amazing and I love it and it's great. It seems like there's COVID prices right now, like the prices are shooting up there trying to find a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if that's still the case. I haven't looked lately, but assuming that you could buy one, Raspbian has actually been renamed Raspberry Pi OS. So Raspbian is the old name, Raspberry Pi OS is the new name, and Raspberry Pis are just great. You could set them up as a Linux server, a retro gaming thing. You could set up Nextcloud on it. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. So, all right. Okay, I will sneak in one here. One more here. Is Linode stable for complex projects in production? It runs my entire company. So if I'm able to trust it for that, then as far as I'm concerned, it should work with just about anything. And I haven't really seen anyone be constrained by it. It's actually a very powerful cloud platform. But again, you could just try it out and see if you like it. So, all right, let's go ahead and continue. So where we left off is we set up a database server and a database within that server. We ran the MySQL secure installation command to give us some basic security. Now it's time to set up the web server. So what you guys can do, you could follow along with this regardless of whether you've set it up or not. Even if you're just watching me and taking notes and you're not actually running commands, you could follow along with this. So this URL that I'm typing on the screen right now, go ahead and go to that URL. It won't work. So if you type that into your browser and press enter, you'll see an error message, and that's okay. That's what that's expected. We haven't actually set it up yet. So if you go to that URL, you should see like a some kind of error page. And when we're done with this section, you'll be able to see something really cool when you refresh the page. But that's the URL right there for my instance. If you are following along with me, you could just use the IP address for this. So for example, to let's see, follow in my own words here. Oops. All right. So I typed it in on my browser and I'm getting unable to connect. So if it works, you're doing it wrong. This is one of those weird things where it's actually supposed to not be working right now. So you're supposed to see an error message at the moment. So this is fine. Anyway, what I'm going to do is paste in this really long command. So you should grab this from the the page that I posted earlier, because I mean, it's so easy to make a typo when you're typing all of this. we're installing PHP right now. And what this should do, though, it should actually cause Apache to be installed as a prerequisite of that. So, yeah, and it was just posted there in the chat. So I'm just going, I mean, those are my notes. When I set up Nextcloud, I drink my own Kool-Aid. I do it the same way I tell other people to do it. There's nothing different about how I do it in the video in my company. I always teach people the way that I actually do it in real life. So you could grab that command from there. I'm going to press enter and then type in my super secret password. Excuse me. And what we want to do is look through the output here. Make sure that Apache 2 is listed. It should be. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. But that's the web server component. We didn't actually ask for that, but we want that, so that's good. So press enter, and it's installing Apache. And the challenge, I would say, to participate, just follow that link that's right above your question there. It's directly the one above you. I'm not going to, I mean, if you get a Nextcloud server set up, you've passed the challenge. So I would say that's the best way to do it. Now, real quick, though, what we're going to do is run systemctl status Apache 2. And it should be active and running like you see here. And because it is, what we can do is refresh this page. Now, it's not going to work with HTTPS yet, so we need to delete that out of there because we haven't set up secure connections. But again, this is the URL to my Linode instance. If you are also running this on Linode, you could type yours, even if it's just an IP address. So if I press enter again, look at this, I get a different page. I've actually set up a web server, and if you're following along with me, you have too. This is now a web server that's accessible from everywhere in the world right now. So regardless of where you are in the world, unless there's some kind of a firewall that's blocking something, you should be able to get to this. Now, obviously, this is not Nextcloud, but it's a step in the right direction. We're able to serve a web page, and that's what we need to get Nextcloud going. Now back here, I'll type Q to get out of that. And what we're going to do is enable some of the PHP mods or add-ons, if you will. So sudo php nmod, which is short for PHP enable mod. And we want to enable BC Math, GMP, iMagick, with a K at the end, INTL. That should be it. Honestly, that simple. So, oh, there are daily Linode-based challenges. Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. That's good to know. So we've enabled some PHP mods. Now, the next thing we're going to do is find out if we're able to unzip files. To find out whether or not that's a possibility, you type which unzip. The which command is one of two commands I know off the top of my head that'll tell you whether or not something is installed. It basically is telling you if this command's available, whatever command you give it. In this case, I'm giving it unzip. I want to find out, is unzip available? And I didn't get any output at all. So unzip is not available. So if I type unzip, it's going to fail because, it's not installed. But what's cool here is it's even giving me the command to use. I didn't even ask, but it was so helpful that it just says, hey, well, if you want to install it, run this command. And I can confirm that is the right command. They're not lying to us. So I'll just run it. Sudo apt install unzip. It's like that. So now we have unzip. How cool is that? Now, earlier I mentioned that we're going to be returning to this zip file here that we downloaded very early in this session. And so to do what we need to do, I'm going to unzip that. So I'll just type unzip and then the name of the zip file, which should be latest.zip. And as soon as I press enter, there's going to be an explosion of text. Like it's just going to be text flying throughout the screen. So I'll press enter. I wasn't kidding, was I? So basically, we just saw the output of the unzip process. I'm sure many of you have probably used unzip on Windows or Mac OS or something. Same thing, really. It's just the command line version of that. So now we have a Nextcloud directory that came from the zip file when we unzipped it. So the output that we saw was everything that's inside that folder. And there's a lot of directories and subdirectories. It's very common for directories to be blue and files to be white. But if we run ls-l against that same directory, or any directory for that matter, we can see the permission string. And I'm not going to make you guys memorize permissions. I have videos for that. But notice here, the first character is a D, and here's a hyphen. We have that straight up and down on the left side. Hyphen is file. So even if we didn't have colorized output, if the permission string, when you run ls-l, starts with a hyphen, that's a file. If it starts with a D, it's a folder, D for directory. And I use directory and folder interchangeably. So that's one way that you could tell the difference. But we have that directory right here. And we also see the hyphen for file, D for directory. So far, so good. Now, what I'm going to do is rename that folder. We do that with the move command, the move, or MV for short. We use that command if we want to move a file from one place to another. We also use it if we want to rename something. So I'm going to rename the Nextcloud directory. And what I like to do is name it the same as the domain. And when I mentioned I want to keep everything consistent, like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't kidding. I'm even going to name the folder the same. I'm going to name it Nextcloud in my case, .learnlinux.cloud. And we can see the new name there. It's wrapping off the edge of the screen, but you get the idea. So what we want to do next is change the ownership. My user J owns this directory, the Nextcloud directory. We know that because we see it right here. But we don't want to serve the Nextcloud off of my name. So what we're going to do is actually run sudo, because we want to change something. Even changing the ownership is going to require that. Chown is short for change ownership. And what we want to do is change the ownership to www-data. That's actually a user. We didn't create that user, but it was created for us when we installed Apache. This is the user that Apache serves websites under. So that's the user, colon. We're going to make the group the same, okay? -R is recursive. So this means that we don't want to just change the Nextcloud directory permissions. -R means the directory I give it plus everything underneath it as well. Okay, so we want everything, the directory itself and everything underneath that, to be owned by www-data. And when I list the storage, you can see that's the case now. It's owned by www-data, same user and group. So far, so good. But right now, if I do pwd, I'm in my home directory, and this is not where we want to serve Nextcloud. We don't want to have people from the internet in our home directory, do we? I don't want it. I don't want that. Not that I have anything against anyone, but it's just security. We want to be safe. So what we'll do is run sudo mv for move. We use that to rename the folder. Now we're actually going to move it. And there's the name of the directory. And if you don't have a domain, you can name it Nextcloud. But even if, excuse me, I said directory. If you don't have a domain, you can shorten the name to whatever your host name was. But what we want to do is move that into a directory. And we're going to move it inside of, /var/www. That's the directory that web pages are served out of. So I'll press enter on that. And then if I list the storage of the var www directory, we can see it's right there. The HTML directory is the default. I'm not using that. I'm just going to leave that alone for now, at least. But we have that moved right where it needs to go. Now, even though we have that directory where Apache can get to it, it's still not going to work. I mean, it works. I mean, we have this web page here, the sample web page, but nothing's changed yet. And that's okay. That's okay, because it shouldn't have changed yet. But what we're going to do now is create the config file for Apache to tell Apache how to serve Nextcloud. So what we'll do for that is run sudo nano, and the file is supposed to be in /etc/apache2 sites available. And then you give the config file a name. So you can actually just do like nextcloud.conf if you don't have a domain. but since I do, I'll make this consistent as well. And you want to make sure that .conf is in the name. And when I press enter, it's an empty file because this file does not exist at all. So yeah. So if I understand correctly, somebody's asking for the commands. That's the URL at the learnlinux.tv URL, basically up a little bit. So that'll have everything in there. Now I'm going to grab this from my notes because I'm human, believe it or not. I'm not a Cylon, the things from Battlestar Galactica, I promise. Actually human. Seems like I'm a robot sometimes, doesn't it? So this file is there at that link I gave you guys earlier, and I would really recommend you copy that just to avoid creating a typo or anything, which can be kind of frustrating. But when you copy that and paste it in here, there's several things that you really want to pay attention to that you'll want to change. So when we named the folder, I named mine nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud. That's the one we moved into that var www directory. And if you named yours differently, you want to make sure it matches right here. So you change from what I have to what yours is. Just make sure that matches. Server name, you could probably just put the IP address here in place of the domain if you don't have one. So that should be fine. And there should be a domain, actually, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in here, which it's refreshing on me. And my memory is foggy, but there is actually a domain that Linode gives it. If you guys, maybe that'll be a challenge if you guys find it. I'll let you guys look for that. But if nothing else, you could just put the IP address here for this third line. This directory right here, it needs to match the document root. That's about, 3 lines above? So you have to have the same thing here. So if yours is different, you have to make that match here as well. That's important. And if I don't tell you to change something, there's a reason for that. You don't have to change it. So we'll go all the way down here. Now, the transfer log and error log, basically what I like to do is have the log files named after the site. And the reason for this is because if you decide to host other things here, if you want to host other websites and things, then you could tell which log file goes to which website. It makes it a lot easier. So we have the access log and the error log. Even if you don't change this here, it'll still be fine. I recommend you do change it to be, to match the rest of it, but this actually doesn't matter. You could call var log Apache 2 matters, that part up to the slash there, but you can name the log file potato or pizza. I'm really hungry. Sorry, guys. You can name it whatever you want. Kittens, puppies, depending on if you're a cat or dog person. No, but all in seriousness, you just name it whatever you'd like. I just follow this naming scheme because it works for me. And then we have the closing virtual host down there. So I'm going to hold Control, press O, Enter to save it, Control X to exit out. So if I list the storage of that directory, Apache 2, sites available, you can see the last one there is the config file that I created for this. But that still doesn't change anything here, though, because simply having that is not going to make it work, but it is most of what we need. We actually need to enable that config file. So that way, if like a outside person just drops a config file on your web server, they can't just serve something. Like imagine if you had a protected directory, they just drop a Apache config file that sets a document root to a document that nobody's supposed to have access to. There's a reason why it's set up this way, but it's really easy to enable this. So it's A2N site. So that's short for enable site. And we're just going to give it, actually the file name should be good enough, but I'll just type it out just to make sure. Apache 2. Actually, we do need to type the config file name. Nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud.conf. Whatever you named yours. So sudo A2N site and then that. So I'll press enter. And it's telling us to reload Apache. I'm not going to do that yet. You can, but we're going to have to restart Apache anyway. So in my opinion, we could just hold that part and just not do that. At this point, we just need to enable the website there. Continuing, what we're going to do is configure PHP. So we'll run sudo nano etc php 7.4 Apache 2, because it's a config file that we want to edit that's specific to Apache. It has its own. And the file name is going to be php.ini. And what we're going to do is look for a bunch of settings. So I actually have them on the website that I linked earlier. And here in my notes, if I scroll down, it's going to look like this, where you have these memory settings. I know you probably can't see this because the writing is too small, but you'll see like memory limit, upload max file size, and things like that. So what we're going to do, and this is the easiest way to do it in my opinion, you just hold Control, press W, which is like a search. And we're going to search for the first one that we want to configure, memory underscore limit. It takes us right to it. It's currently set to 128 megabytes. That's not good enough. We want to basically up that so Nextcloud will have more memory available to it. I'll set that to 512. That's the recommended. And this is all coming from the Nextcloud documentation. That's where I got it from. I didn't mean to actually press enter there. Control W again. And we're going to, and it shows the previous search term. That's fine. We're just going to search for something different. I think we could just shorten this to upload max. So upload underscore max. And there it is. Upload max file size. It's currently set to 2 megabytes. I'll just set it to 200 so it can accept bigger files. I mean, one of the things that Nextcloud does for us is store files. So we kind of want that. So that's a good idea. Control W again. We'll search for the next one. And again, these are all on the link. So max exec, that's just short. Max execution time, it's currently set to 30. We're going to set that to 360. I have a habit of pressing enter, so ignore that. But it says 360, that's what we want. Control W again. Next up, post underscore max. I'm just abbreviating that. Post underscore max. And that's currently set to 8 megabytes. And we're going to match that to the upload size from earlier, to 200 megabytes. Control W again. We're going to search for date.timezone. And you type the time zone code here for your location. So I highly doubt yours is the same as me, but mine is America, and the A is uppercase for that, specifically in Detroit, so America/Detroit. But right above this, it has php.net, date.timezone. You should be able to go there and find yours if you don't already know what yours is. And we also want to make sure that we uncomment this. So if any of the things that we've customized so far has a semicolon in front, it's commented out. So definitely want to uncomment that. So I'll set it to that for me. One moment. Okay. We're not quite done here though. So the next one we want to do is look for opcache underscore, or actually, excuse me, dot enable. I'm going to uncomment that. One is what we want, but we want to uncomment that. I just like to be explicit when I set things. So opcache again, dot interned. We're going to leave that at 8. That's correct. Opcache.memory. I think I had to type at least some of this out. Consumption. Set to 128. We're going to leave it at 128, but I uncommented that one. It looks like I skipped one, so let me grab the next one here. So I'm going one above the one I was on. Should be .max, I believe. That's right here. Same screen. It's set to 10,000 right now. So we're going to leave that at 10,000. .save underscore comments. Same, we uncomment that. Opcache.revalidate. Actually, it was one above where I was anyway. Let me type that in. Opcache.revalidate. And that's currently set to 2. We're actually going to change that to 1. So we'll save it, Control O, and then Enter. And then Control X to exit out. So next, what we want to do is enable some Apache mods, basically. So sudo a2 nmod. We're going to enable dir, env, headers, mime, rewrite, and SSL. And this is, again, all on the website, all on the link. And this is coming from the Nextcloud documentation. So I'm just going to run this command to enable the mods for Apache. These are required for Nextcloud to work, or maybe a feature for Nextcloud. Each one is different. Some of them will be already enabled. That's fine. Now, earlier it told us to reload Apache 2, and we ignored that. Now it's telling us to restart Apache 2. So if we restart it, it actually takes care of both. And how we could do that is we can run sudo systemctl restart Apache 2. And what this will do, if it works well, we'll double check that, is it's going to restart Apache and make everything take effect that we've enabled, basically. And then we check the status of Apache. Excuse me. A lot of allergies in Michigan these days. So we're going to check the status. It's active and running. If you did anything wrong, if there's a typo anywhere, it's going to fail. But in my case, it worked. So you should have active and running there for Apache, which is pretty cool. And let's see what else we can do. So what I'm going to try to do right now is actually, let's see, one moment. Let's do this. Let's run sudo apt install snapd. What we're going to do is get an SSL cert. Now, this is optional. You can only do this if you have a domain. So if you don't have a domain, just don't even follow along, at least not yet. But if you do have a domain like me, I'm just going to press enter here. Snapd is already installed. So we want to do sudo snap install core. Snap packages are another form of package, but it's how the program that we're going to download is made available. So that's why we're using this. And then sudo snap refresh core. The semicolon here is just separating one command from another. Whoops, accidental scroll there. So what this means is it's going to first run this command, the command on the left side of the semicolon, and then it's going to run the one on the right. So it's just basically putting two commands in one line is all that is. So I'll press enter. Give this a moment to finish. Okay. So what we should be able to do now is run sudo snap install classic with 2 hyphens in front of it, and then certbot. Oops, I can't type today, apparently. So again, if you don't have a domain, you don't have to follow along with this. But there's nothing wrong with having it, I guess, if you plan to get one later. But right now it's installing certbot, and that allows us to get a Let's Encrypt certificate from Let's Encrypt. That's what it allows us to do. And because I have a domain, I can do that. So what I'm going to do is run sudo snap. Whoops, actually, I already did that. So sudo ln-s, a symbolic link, /snap bin certbot /usr bin certbot. And these commands are from the Let's Encrypt documentation. We're creating a symbolic link, so if a program is looking for certbot under user bin certbot, it'll find it. It'll just point it to snap bin certbot, which means either way, whether the app is requesting certbot with this path or this one, either way it's going to find it. So that's why we're doing that. Sudo, and this is the fun command right here. Sudo certbot. And then what we're going to do is run -- Apache because that's the web server that we're using. We'll see if this works. Email address. You should, if you're actually using this in production, you should absolutely use a real email because this is going to be how it lets you know that the certificate is going to be expiring if it is. So it's very important that you have a real email here if it's production. Yes, I will accept. I'm going to say no because I just typed a phony email address. It's up to you. You can just read this right here. If you want to share the email, you can. I'm not going to, though. It's not even a real email address. And it says select the appropriate numbers. Blank to select all options. Well, I'll just explicitly say 1 because the Nextcloud domain is showing there. So it's requesting a certificate for Nextcloud right now. It says that it worked. Now, there's going to be some additional things that we need to configure, but technically Nextcloud should work now, actually. So here I have the Apache start page, moment of truth. Check this out. And of course, it's going to make a liar out of me. I think if I remember correctly, I had it under, was it Nextcloud? Nope. So let's go ahead and restart Apache. And I'm going to take another look at that config file, make sure I have the URL correct in there. Apache 2 sites available, and then Nextcloud. No, oh, right. And these files are going to change anyway because of Let's Encrypt, so that's fine. So right here, we actually have, so there's no subdirectory. So what we should be able to do is restart this. And for some reason, it's not working. Let's try to do HTTPS in my case. Ah, there it is. So here we have Nextcloud. So it wasn't working because I converted it to SSL and I didn't type HTTPS. So as most of you probably don't have a domain anyway, it probably worked for you guys. So what we're going to do is create a admin account right here. So I'll just create J, I guess. It's probably better to come up with a longer name, but that's fine. The password is the password that you want to use to log in. And this is the admin user of Nextcloud. You want to make sure you have a really good password here. So I'll type in mine. And I think that's good enough. So data folder, we're going to leave that alone. If you have another disk you want to have your data on, that's what that's for. And anyway, the database user is Nextcloud. Database password, I created it and saved it in clear text, even though you're not supposed to do that. Do as I say, not as you do, as I do, right? So where did I actually put that? It was up here. Aha. That's the password that I used. Whoops. So what I'll do is paste the password in right there. So you can see it's pasted in. Database name is Nextcloud. Localhost is correct. And let's click install. I will not save the password. Don't need to save it. It says installing. We're just going to wait, see what happens. And also notice that we have the padlock here. That's pretty cool. Recommended apps. Check this out. So I'm going to say install recommended apps. I want to check out everything that it has to offer here. And it's actually going to go through the installation process for these apps. So we have calendar, collaboration, contacts, mail. There's also a chat client in here too. So this can really do a lot of things. So now it's on contacts. And it's normal for this to take a moment. And one of the things that we're going to do is look for errors. And there are some things that I omitted from the setup, or actually I put towards the end on purpose that we could have done earlier. But I want to show you guys how to look for errors in Nextcloud and how to fix them. And I'll give you the cheat and I'll let you know how to fix it too. So now it's on mail. So we're almost there. We're getting closer and closer. Yay, we're on the last one now. So yeah, I've actually seen this take like 5 minutes or something before. So I think we should be getting close to the end now. I don't see any logging or anything to show what it's waiting on, but it could take a minute and looks like it's just about done actually. So while we're waiting, you guys could pop in a question. Maybe I'll look for a question here to answer while we're waiting so we can be productive. Just scrolling through the chat right now, see what I have in here. You could also re-ask your question if you've already asked it and I didn't see it. I could tell it's still loading something, so still waiting on that. Any questions in the chat while we're waiting for this to finalize? The page should automatically refresh as soon as it's ready. So just out of curiosity, I'm going to open a new tab here and just see what happens. I'm not saying you guys should do this. Whoops, that's actually my real Nextcloud server. Don't want to go on that one yet. So yeah, it's definitely loading something. So I'll even take Linux related questions that are off topic just to be productive here. Yeah, I haven't actually used the Talk plugin myself. I should probably give that a shot one time. My business, I already have a solution for that, but I should probably just give that a shot and see how the online meetings goes. Because they're talking about the plugin right here. So I haven't actually tried that one yet. I think I've tried all of these actually. The code server, I'm not so sure about. The online office document editing, I've absolutely done that. Yeah, when it comes to mail servers, I ran a mail server of my own for something like 2 years. Life is too short for that. There really isn't a good reason to do that, in my opinion, because it's just so complicated, and it's one of those things that can be working fine 1 minute and then it just doesn't work the next because maybe forgot a step and it was working, and I never really did understand that. But I mean, I was successful in maintaining it, but at the end of the day, I just buy email from companies like Hover is one of my favorites. There's a number of others, Proton Mail, there's Fast Mail. It's better just to use one of those if you need an email server. So life is too short. And it's interesting. This is, it's because it's a live presentation. As many times as I've done this, it's never taken this long to actually come up before. So actually, is it already loading? That's funny. Yep, it's already loading. So the minute I try to go in behind the scenes, because I'm impatient, it's already starting to load. So it's almost there now. Color coding in the terminal. That is actually a terminal customization. So basically, generally speaking, blue for directories, green for executable, white for files. That's not always the case because, again, that's a distribution specific customization. It's just that the majority of distros do that. But since we can't always rely on that, especially if your distribution doesn't colorize the output, that's why we look at the D or hyphen at the beginning, because that could be that's the sure way to know which one is which. Yes, you can sync calendar and contacts to your phone. That is correct. So you could basically set up Nextcloud to be your cloud provider, so to speak. It's kind of like a cloud in a cloud. So I'm using Linode, a cloud provider, Nextcloud inside of Linode. So if you wanted to forego like Google contacts or your Apple contacts or whatever that is, depending what kind of phone you have, you could absolutely set your contacts here, calendar and all that, and then just have it here in this service. I'm not going to be syncing my phone right now, but it is something you can absolutely do. And just to be on the safe side, I think I probably messed it up by trying to go to it in the middle of its process here. So it's taking a good minute. All right. So what I'm going to do, just to be on the safe side, switch to root, go into var log, and Apache 2. We have our error. We have our logs here. Let's see. Is there anything in error log? Yeah, I don't think these matter so much. So Nextcloud error log. That's interesting. So it's not able to find that file, but why wouldn't it be able to find that file? Let's see if I can list the storage on there. And there is no info.php. So this is a new error. So I'm not actually sure why this is coming up. Systemctl status can help, but it often doesn't give you enough information, because like what you can see here is that it's giving you some info, but it's not really giving us a whole lot of useful information. Sometimes the syslog can give you some information as well. So you could do like a tail follow, tail-f against the syslog. And what I'm going to do is check the browser again. So it's still not loaded. It looks like it's trying to load, so this is really unusual. Let's try this again. Restart Apache 2. Don't follow along with this, guys, because I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I'm doing it. Now, how are you guys doing? Did you guys run into the same problem on your end? Can anyone just ping back and let me know if you got this set up, or if there was some kind of a problem, or if it's waiting like it is for me? Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if I have something crazy in my firewall config or something that's blocking this. That would absolutely make sense to me. So Let's try sudo a to nmod auth z. It was this one. This is interesting. So shouldn't need to do this at all. The joys of doing things live, right? We have a firewall. Let's see, no firewall. Check Nextcloud, or excuse me, check Linode. No firewall. We have the IP address right here. Everything checks out. Nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud. And you know what I'm going to do is try a different browser, because that could be the problem. Whoops, can't type today. Interesting. So I'm trying to install a different browser, and that'll help me understand. It's just Chromium browser, so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm just installing that package there. There we go. Because I think I have a theory already with what's causing our problem today. So let's load Chromium. And that's because I didn't disable the other site. So we will be fixing that. As a matter of fact, all right, and this might even be my problem. So I'm basically just disabling the two that come with it, the 000 default and the default SSL. So what we should be able to do is restart, systemctl, restart Apache 2. That's hilarious. Typo time. Okay. And let's go ahead and try this again. Make sure to include HTTPS, which we have here. Yeah, the config did say 80, but Let's Encrypt is supposed to actually change that to 443, because what happens, and that's actually a very smart answer. So what I'm going to do is actually remove the two here. So notice how we have the one at the bottom, nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud, but it has some information at the end. That was created by Let's Encrypt. And if we go ahead and cat that out, you can see right here that it's actually 443. So this is actually correct. So we have learnlinux.cloud, we have that. So far we have everything that we need right here. So let me go back to Firefox. And actually, I think I might have other problems on my home network as well. So I think this is actually a problem on my end that I have to troubleshoot in my own firewall. So this is not actually something that we should be running into, but in lieu of actually seeing a real demo. And by the way, if someone wants to just try to go to nextcloud.learnlinux.cloud with HTTPS on your end, feel free to try. And that'll also help me understand if it's something on my end, which is what I think it is. Um, and sites enabled versus sites available, that is a good thing to say. But that is when we run the A2 and site option, it enables it. So we see them listed here. So they're both enabled though. So that would be something that would absolutely be it. But I'm pretty sure it's my firewall on my end. So it's not something that I can troubleshoot in the amount of time that we have left. So we've tried that URL with HTTPS in front of it. Specifically, I'm just curious if that works for anyone else because I do have, I had some other issues this morning on my network, which is why I'm thinking that it's my fault on my end here. And it's waiting and waiting. Yep, got waiting still. So what, you know what I'm going to do? Let's just reboot it. Shouldn't have to do this, but we will try. So nobody can access it now. But we will be able to access it soon if we can. If not, I will just talk about some of the features that we have. And I'm going to do that now just in case we don't actually see it in action. So files, for example, that allows you to sync files just like it says. So that's pretty cool. So you can basically have the Nextcloud desktop app. They have that for Mac OS and all the OS or operating systems out there. There's like phone apps as well. So you can even download the Nextcloud app on your smartphone and just hook it into your actual Nextcloud installation. So immediately you could think of some of the benefits here because if you, let's just say you have your photo collection, you have like your files, your code files, your note files, your books, whatever it is. You can have them in files and then access them from wherever you are, which is just really fun. And that's just one of the many features here. There's Nextcloud Talk I mentioned earlier. There's the Office online collaboration. Let's just try to ping that server, see if it's back up yet. Which it's not. So you can see some information here. They have a little video, and I also have a video of this working on my website on the video that I went over, and there will be an updated video for Ubuntu 22.04, by the way. So it looks like the server is now online. So it's been rebooted. So I fully suspect that this is going to still be a problem because I know there's an issue on my own network here, which I thought it was just me, but it was not. It was everything. So apologies for that, guys. But you will see it in action, and this will work if I figure out whatever it is on my end that's blocking it. I literally have something in probably my pfSense that's flagging this for some reason. So that could absolutely be it. Let me just make sure I don't have an Etsy host file entry there. So I do not. So could even be a propagation problem. So yeah, I'll answer some question, guys. So apologies for this odd, strange thing. And basically somebody said debugging is 95% of the work. You are so right. And, I'm actually in a way kind of glad this happened because this also shows you that nobody's infallible. There's always going to be something that you have to fine tune. And this is also a learning experience. I think we only have like 6 minutes. So if it wasn't for that, like I probably would actually invite you guys to log in and, help troubleshoot this. As a matter of fact, I will Let's see, 6 minutes left. So yeah, there's really not a collaborative troubleshooting session would have been the same. So what I could do is if there's extra time in tomorrow's session, I will let you guys know what the problem was and also show you Nextcloud in action then because we're going to be using Nextcloud as the example in tomorrow's session anyway. The theme is going to be securing it. That's going to be our main focus. But if you join me in tomorrow's session, I'll know what's going on with this thing. And I'm sure it's just a step that I forgot or something with my local network. No big deal. I will get that fixed. And we will continue this tomorrow in that session. And then after we go through the remainder of Nextcloud, I'll show you what it looks like. You'll see it in all its glory. And at that point, we'll switch over to security. We'll secure it. That's what we'll do. And if it still isn't working, then I might actually have a group troubleshooting session and I might even fix it myself, break it so it's back to the way it was, not working, and then give you guys some time to see if you can figure out what it is before I give you the answer. I'll let you know how it's going to go down tomorrow when we go through that session, but this could be a very important learning opportunity. So we've built the server, so we're almost there. So what I'm going to do is switch it here. Do you guys have any other questions in the meantime? We have 5 minutes before this session is over, and we will reconvene the same time tomorrow, but we can use the 5 minutes. If anyone wants to ask anything at all, feel free to do so. And I'll just give you guys a moment to get a chance to ask. If not, if you don't have any questions, you could head on out to your next session. But otherwise, I hope to see you all tomorrow because that's when it's all going to go full circle, and we're going to absolutely know what's going on. You're right. Wow, Codezilla, that's such a great username. I love that username. That's so cool. I'm a Godzilla fan, so I like Zilla and anything. That's sweet. You are welcome. Yeah, so basically we were having some trouble with the server. So we're going to have a continuation tomorrow. But if you look at the link that that's been posted a few times in the chat, it's a learnlinux.tv link. It has all the commands there and also a video as well. So if you're late, don't worry about it. It's fine. You still have plenty of time to get caught up before tomorrow's session. So there's no worries at all. So yeah, sometimes it is the case that initializing websites can be annoying. But then again, it's usually DNS, right? I mean, that it's always that at the end of the day. It's funny how many times it ends up being DNS. It's almost like the what was it in Doctor House for anyone that watched that show? I think it was lupus or something like that kept being a topic. It's like our version of lupus is DNS. It's just always that. Yep. So yeah, that's pretty much all there was to it for this session. I'm just looking for any last minute questions. I don't see any right now. So I think I'm going to call it. That was our session. We will reconvene tomorrow. I will keep this server up and we will go through the rest of it then. We will talk about security, some ways that we could try to keep people out of our server that we don't want to access our server, which is very important to do. And I hope to see all of you in that session tomorrow, and it's going to be awesome.